In another universe, this movie could have been a bangin' adaptation of Moby Dick.
Why didn't you tell us Ballister was working with whales? Hurry before the whale gets here!
Tiny whale.
Nimona is a 2023 animated film based on the 2015 graphic novel of the same name. Author N.D. Stevenson developed the character and concept when he was still a student at the Maryland Institute College of Art. The project's subsequent success helped him earn work in the greater world of animation, writing for shows like Wander Over Yonder, Rapunzel's Tangled Adventure, and the DuckTales reboot before developing She-Ra and the Princesses of Power for Netflix.
For the honor of gray whales!
Nimona's film adaptation was originally supposed to be produced by Blue Sky Studios, but after their parent company was bought out by Disney, the movie entered an era of production hell that ended with its unceremonious cancellation in 2021. If I had a nickel for every time a major studio acquired a smaller company just to shut them down within 2 years of said acquisition, I'd have 2 nickels. R.I.P. Rooster Teeth, and fuck the tax write-offs that encourage such shitty business practices.
What kind of game are you playing? Capitalism, where everyone wins except you.
Almost 1 year after Blue Sky's unfair closure, independent production studio Annapurna Pictures acquired the rights to the film and struck up a distribution deal with Netflix. The finished film debuted on June 14th of the following summer, and was met with critical acclaim for its animation and themes. Its score is particularly praiseworthy, and I'm not just saying that as a biased Buffy the Vampire Slayer fan. Christoph Beck just has a way with music. There are a few key differences between the novel and the movie, but I wouldn't classify these departures as unfaithfulness to the source material. These changes merely help to accentuate the strengths of each medium. Both versions explore themes of queerness and identity, but their approaches have been slightly altered to accommodate for their respective shifts in genre. The graphic novel is essentially a superhero narrative. Ballister Blackheart proudly self-identifies as a villain, and his nemesis Sir Goldenloin constantly mentions the unspoken rules of their rivalry. I was reminded of Pete Malecki's 10-minute play The Goon. If you haven't read it, I highly recommend doing so. It's a hilarious deconstruction of the evil lackey trope.
Why do you think we have our guns calibrated 30 degrees to the left? All you have to do is aim vaguely near the damn bastard, shoot, and miss! Yeah, well, I missed. Missing.
Movie Ballister, on the other hand, is about as intimidating as a wet paper towel.
Are you saying that you're not a villain?
Yes!
He doesn't see himself as a villain, but the entire kingdom thinks he killed the queen, so he's primarily concerned with clearing his name. The film also focuses on classism and its wider implications. Ballister would have been the first ever commoner to serve as an elite knight, and this designation would have opened the door for other peasants to join these sacred ranks. The director views this as a metaphorical crack in the wall, one that would only widen with time.
I beg the Queen not to question the word of Gloreth. Not to question what's kept us safe for 1,000 years. But she wouldn't listen.
Her anxiety reveals a darker truth that's unfortunately present in real-world politics. Biases like elitism solely exist to justify exclusionary policies.
There is a villain on the loose in our kingdom.
To be othered by society is to be viewed or treated as intrinsically different from everyone else. Organizations intentionally exclude certain groups or individuals to create the illusion of unity. By vilifying these quote-unquote nonconformists, the public has a common enemy to resent. Thus, their ire is directed away from the major institutions that are responsible for everyone's suppression.
Our safety will be put in the hands of a commoner.
I don't feel safe. It's not what Gloreth wanted.
Yeah, I really hope the Queen knows what she's doing.
Even the most atypical individuals aren't immune to this process of government-endorsed gaslighting. Ballister was literally framed for murder, but he still believes said framing must have been justifiable in some way. Otherwise, he'd have to accept the harsh reality that he's sunk far too much misplaced faith into a broken institution.
But the Institute's not the problem. The director is.
They brainwashed you good.
I was again reminded of Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Season 4's overarching narrative followed the Initiative, a top-secret government program concerned with homogenizing identity and creating perfect soldiers.
I am how they train me.
Both organizations impose a black and white binary on the concept of monsters, and both organizations take issue with a rebellious girl who refuses to conform to their rules and expectations. To them, nothing is more dangerous than a secure individual who doesn't want an assigned identity.
What are you?
I'm Nimona.
No, that's not an answer.
Enter Nimona, a spunky shapeshifter who is Ballister's self-appointed sidekick. She sees this disgraced knight as a kindred spirit. He too was rejected by the world, so she incorrectly assumes that he would also want to expose the institution's corruption.
I promise, I will not break!
This is the part where you run.
Her abilities serve as an extended metaphor for gender fluidity and the general experience of being othered by a society that prioritizes straight, white, able-bodied, and neurotypical people. She can't easily be pigeonholed into one specific category, and she doesn't want to be.
I'm Nimona.
That explains literally nothing.
Labels may seem like helpful tools for constructing complete identities, but they're ultimately a restrictive approach to understanding yourself and other people. No one can be easily defined by a single word. An individual is the accumulation of their actions, experiences, and opinions, and those things are informed by outside factors like geography, income, and education.
The street kid with the impossible dream of being a knight.
I'm here to slay monsters and protect our kingdom!
The term identity politics is often thrown around by conservative politicians who want to paint their opposition as pedantic juveniles, but everyone's identities are inherently political. That fact is merely a byproduct of the way our world is structured. Narrow-mindedness is the preferred train of thought for government organizations because labeling your detractors as something insignificant or invalid is a political shortcut that circumvents basic human empathy. This subtle process of indoctrination is something Ballister has to repeatedly confront throughout the film.
Can you just be you, please?
I don't follow.
Ballister constantly asks Nimona to dial it down. He tentatively accepts her status as a shapeshifter, but he still wants her to be inconspicuous and discreet because he thinks Nimona's bombastic personality makes her life harder than it needs to be. Ever a queer metaphor if there was one.
Can you please just be normal for a second?
Normal?
I just think it'd be easier if you were a girl.
These requests aren't malicious in nature, but they're an extension of Ballister's unexamined discomfort with different things. He wants to slap a straightforward label onto his sidekick and put her into a clearly marked box because he thinks that'll help him understand her better. But that box would only be a disservice to both himself and Nimona. Designations are not descriptions, especially not if someone else ascribes them to you. So it's only fitting that Nimona's least favorite label is monster.
Come on, say it!
Say it! Say it, Mom!
Here's where I run the risk of ruffling a few feathers. Nimona is by no means a monster, but I also wouldn't say she's a good person. Book Nimona actively kills dozens of people, and movie Nimona's first impulse is always to cause chaos and violence.
If you see anyone,
murder them.
Hide! If you see anyone, hide!
This aspect of her character goes relatively unexplored. In the book, her violent rage can be interpreted as a self-defense trigger, but in the film, her behavior primarily functions as comic relief.
They were like this when I got here.
It's implied that her ferocity stems from her jaded understanding of the world. If everyone will only ever see her as a monster, then she might as well act monstrous. But this analysis is mostly trapped in the subtext.
We're villains! Embrace it!
I'm not saying that a character has to be morally correct 100% of the time. Quite the opposite, really. Fiction is entertaining in part because of its ability to push boundaries and challenge audiences. But a common problem with N.D. Stevenson's writing is that his conclusions fail to coalesce with his stories in their entirety. The aforementioned She-Ra reboot is, at times, brilliant, but its worst flaws are rooted in this underlying dissonance. Certain character arcs don't feel satisfying because the totality of their actions constitute literal war crimes, yet the narrative refuses to punish them for these piss-poor choices.
So are we all just, okay with this?
These discrepancies lead to serious problems when you go to dissect broader themes and ideas. I'm hesitant to call these stories naive, but there's definitely a shared lack of nuance and foresight. Redemption is a never-ending process, not unlike maintaining sobriety. It's an admirable goal with no clear finish line. There isn't a tangible reward. Self-improvement is a long process, and you have to make those better choices every day. A single apology can't fix a year's worth of wrongdoings, nor can a heroic grand gesture change the opinion of an entire kingdom. I admire these optimistic takes on forgiveness and bigotry, but they're just not realistic. Love can't conquer all, and no matter how much progress we make as a society, there will always be a subsect of people who are racist, homophobic, and sexist. Nimona managed to change Ballister's mind, but that only happened after he was othered and rejected too.
No matter what we do, we can't change the way people see us.
If I sound like a cynical asshole right now, It's because I am one. Optimism will never be my first impulse. And though I think topics like self-loathing and unworthiness should be addressed in media, I strongly dislike it when innocent people are caught in the crossfire of those self-destructive tendencies. That being said, there's still plenty of reasons to celebrate this film. The scene where Ballister saves Nimona from herself is triumphant. Chloe Grace Moretez's performance is astounding. The guttural scream she lets out here is some of the best voice acting I've ever heard. It encapsulates a millennium's worth of pain and suffering, and she nearly succumbs to the weight of it. But just before Nimona falls onto Gloreth's golden sword, Ballister catches her. It's worth noting that the hand he places atop her aching heart is his prosthetic one. Their connection started because of a shared label, an imposed identity that neither cared for. But their love for one another outgrew this reductive designation, and together, they redefined what home looks like.
I see you, Nimona. And you're not alone.
Intersectionality is a social framework that examines how different discriminatory practices overlap to further isolate individuals. Powerful systems interlock factors like race, class, gender, and sexuality to broaden their oppressive tactics. But those same factors can be used to unify seemingly disparate groups, and Nimona understands their capacity for empowerment.
Us weirdos have to stick together, you know?
This is how we build communities. This is how we forge lasting ties. Speaking as someone who minored in history, the most interesting aspect of this film is the way it discusses Gloreth. She's a borderline mythological figure who people both aspire to be and request guidance from. Her infamous war cry, "Go back to the shadows from whence you came," has inspired 1,000 years' worth of citizens, and her descendants are similarly glorified. Members of this lineage are placed atop pedestals for others to worship, and that celebrity status is a major source of pressure for Ambrosius.
Thankfully, we have a descendant of Gloreth to lead us.
What?
The seeds of Gloreth's personal history are not holistically untrue, but the institution is largely responsible for cultivating her narrative and growing it into a significant piece of government propaganda. Her statue is a pillar of hope for society, but for Nimona, it's a cruel reminder of her worst rejection.
Gloreth?
A common misconception about history is that it's a collection of set-in-stone facts carved out by exceptional individuals. But to quote a cut lyric from Hamilton, the reality is messier and richer than a couple of bullet points listed on some handwritten flashcards. Social studies classes often fail to teach students the more nuanced aspects of past events because complex topics are harder to memorize. This flaw is further exacerbated by the fact that power structures obscure history and warp narratives to control an unassuming public. But Nimona doesn't believe the institution's lies because she experienced these events firsthand.
He wasn't gay, he was just... He was kind of gay!
Gloreth was Nimona's first friend. Their connection was beautiful, a childhood bond that began when Gloreth pulled Nimona into the light. This subplot is, in my opinion, a vast improvement over the source material. Gloreth is barely even an entity in the novel, and the material that is there doesn't exactly paint Nimona in the best light. Rejection was the last thing on Gloreth's mind when Nimona first shapeshifted in front of her. The two girls were free to be themselves around each other, but the other villagers failed to see the purity of this friendship. Fear was their first impulse, and reactionary violence soon followed. Influenced by her parents and the other adults, Gloreth adopted this harmful mindset and said with a wavering voice,
"Go back to the shadows from whence you came."
There's nothing heroic about this scene. Gloreth's valiant battle cry was merely a meek statement, a sentence laced with hesitance uttered by a scared little girl who was swayed by an angry mob. These words are propped up by the institution as a source of courage, hope, and strength, but no monsters were slain that day. No one walked away victorious. It was just a tragic perpetuation of rejecting the other from society.
I don't know what's scarier. The fact that everyone in this kingdom wants to run a sword through my heart. Or that sometimes I just want to let them.
History has a nasty habit of repeating itself. People tend to fall into the same troughs their predecessors plowed. These patterns are cyclical and predictable. "Those who do not learn from history are doomed to repeat it" is a common anecdote, but the meaning of this phrase is often misunderstood. It's also frequently misattributed to British Prime Minister Winston Churchill. The actual quote reads, "Those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it," and it was written by Spanish-American philosopher George Santayana in his book The Life of Reason. One does not simply learn history by regurgitating facts. True knowledge comes from the context we obtain upon closer examination. We have to analyze our automatic impulses and question the validity of specific practices. Hindsight is indeed a luxury, but informed choices can still be made, and tradition is one of the worst possible justifications for damaging policies. The length of time we've adhered to something does not make that course of action any more or less correct.
Gloreth did whatever it took to keep the monsters out. And so will I.
I may be a cynic, but I do know that change is possible. Once we tear down these constrictive barriers, we can discover the beauty that lies beyond the wall. You are the author of your own narrative, and it's never too late to reclaim it.
What do you...
It's time to rewrite this story.
Nimona! Nimona!
This video is brought to you by my patrons. If you'd like to support me and the channel, please consider pledging. I would deeply appreciate it.
Hey, boss.
Holy...